Good evening and welcome to today's meeting of the West Berkshire Council Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Eric Pattenden, the chair of the committee. Today's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the chamber. In addition to myself, the other members of the committee in attendance are councillors Dominic Bowick, Owen Jeffrey, Chris Reid, Louis Sturgis and Howard Wollaston. Councillor David Marsh, I think, is on Zoom from what he said earlier on. We also have parish.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We also have parish council representatives on the committee, councillors Bill Graham and David Southgate, and independent member Simon Carey. Parish councillors and independent members are permitted to speak at the meeting, but they are not permitted to vote on the items. I believe Sarah Clark, along with Joseph Holmes, Shannon Coleman Slaughter, Julie Gillespie and Kathleen Bogos are the officers who will be advising the meeting. And we also have David Johnson from Grant Thornton in attendance. Sadie Owen is in attendance as the clerk to the meeting and Lizzie Reeves as the Zoom host. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, which will be shown to us by the trained officers present. Please follow any instructions given by the trained officers present, and the assembly point is the car park at the Dolphin Pub. So item 1, apologies. Clerk, do we receive any apologies?
Just from councillors Jeremy Cottam and Ian Cottingham.
Ian Cottingham and Jeremy Cottam. Thank you. Item 2, the minutes. Members, are you willing to accept the minutes of the previous meeting as a true and accurate record? Hang on, I've got a whole speech to read out, Owen. I need a proposer and a seconder for minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of March and the 25th of May 2023. Thank you. Proposed.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be very happy to propose
Councillor Jeffrey,
both sets of minutes.
Councillor Bowick.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. Can we raise our hands if we agree that the minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record? Thank you. And for the minutes of the 25th of May 2023, we also raise hands. Thank you. And I'll sign them when they're available. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Clerk, do we have any declarations of interest?
None received.
Thank you. Any from the floor? No, thank you. Item 4, board plan. Officers and members, are there any amendments that you would like to be considered for the forward plan? No, okay, thank you. Forward plan is noted. Item 5, external audit findings report for financial statements 2020 to 21. Shannon, would you like to introduce the report, and David as well, perhaps? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the covering report for the 2021 financial statements latest audit findings report from our external auditors, Grant Thornton. The expectation is these financial statements will be signed off and they will be an unmodified opinion. I will hand over to David at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Shannon. So as Shannon has said, this is an update of the 2021 financial statements, the audit of, And we are aware that that is clearly 2 financial years behind where we are, although we have started the 21-22 audit as well, as we endeavour to sort of make up the shortfall. As I say, we're aware of the issue in terms of that delay in getting these audits done. It is a combination of a number of things, including on our side, which we are looking to address through resourcing and also looking at the code requirements in terms of what are our requirements to complete the work. I am conscious that not everybody has seen this report previously, and therefore the highlighted elements in blue probably mean very little to some members, but will mean more to others. Suffice to say, those highlighted in blue are the adjustments and the update to the work that we've done since we last reported our findings. I will go through, just pick out some of the key areas in terms of those for consideration, just to bring members up to speed, but hopefully I won't take too long on that. The first one is on page 21. You'll see in blue, we have now got 7 material adjustments, which has resulted in an adjustment to the council's comprehensive CIES of just short of 8.5 million. And those are sort of detailed further down in the report as we get to them. Page 25 is probably the next page of interest. So these are the significant risks. Those significant risks, as it says here, are those where we feel that further work is done, further work is required, because this is those areas we consider to be most at risk of what we call material misstatement. Material misstatement are those errors within the accounts that are over and above our materiality level, which is 5.1 million for the council, which therefore would require any changes to the primary statements. In terms of these significant risks, some of them are mandatory or statutory, as in management override of controls and fraud in revenue and expenditure, which are listed there. The rest are those areas that we generally think are, again, more at risk of material misstatement, and they tend to be those larger balances or those items that have a higher degree of estimation and therefore potential variance from management's estimations and assumptions. You will see on page 28 that we have had further work on the pension liability. For this, we gain assurance from the auditors of Berkshire Pension Fund. Any issues that they identify, we have to make an assessment in terms of whether that would impact the council's accounts. And you'll see from that first bullet point, there was an increase in pension fund assets of 48.1 million. And given that the council's share of this was 13%, that equated to a £6.3 million variance. Again, a material adjustment, but not one that the council could have foreseen. As I say, again, this comes out of the auditors of Berkshire Pension Fund's report, but we have to act on it. Page 29 is new issues and risks. So whereas those that are on the previous pages are those identified at the planning stage, as we work through, we will necessarily or occasionally, and sometimes not at all, find those new issues and risks that we consider would have a big impact on the accounts or would require further consideration by, or that we would like to bring to members' attention to give them a fuller view of the work that's being done. Again, you'll see on page 31 that we've, and page 32, that we've identified 2 further issues. The least disclosure is a disclosure issue, but given, i.e. it doesn't impact on the primary statements, but given the adjustment is just over just short of 18 million, we felt it was prudent to change that within disclosure to allow the reader of the accounts a full understanding of what that figure should be. The issue on page 32, without going into too much of a story on this was something that was identified as another audit that had a national impact. There were a number of meetings and considerations, and eventually it was agreed that an statutory override would be brought in, which came into force on the 25th of December. We've now completed that work, and members will see in the second final paragraph of the commentary that we are now happy with the useful economic lives, although we did identify a variance of 1 million. Again, not material, and management have chosen not to adjust the financial statements. There is it says here our work in this area is ongoing. We have actually completed that, and there is an issue in terms of further work needed to be done around what is known as the useful economic lives of these infrastructure assets, which I know Shannon and her team are currently dealing with. Page 33 is our review of the key judgments and estimates made by management. To make it easy, or to make it more user-friendly, we colour code those that are anything that isn't purple is those that members should potentially be more aware of. But again, you'll see that these ones, land and buildings, and the grant income recognition, these are reported elsewhere within the accounts. So this is just a summary of that. You may ask why, having made a material adjustment, pension liability is purple. Again, as said previously, the adjustment is due to the pension funds issues rather than management. So we are comfortable with the processes that management have in place. Page 37 is our review, is the one of most interest areas, accounting practices. Those are those areas where we have identified that we do not think management are complying with the code upon which the accounts are based, but they do not have necessarily a significant impact on the accounts, and therefore we just report them here to show that management and the auditors don't necessarily agree on the treatment, but they don't impact the accounts in any significant way. The other side of the audit on page 40 is the value for money arrangements. This is a review of how management employ their assets and their and various other elements to provide value for money and good use of the good provision of services. That is also ongoing for 2021 for a number of issues, but that will be reported in September. The next area again is the appendices. So page 44, again, we've color coded them. And this time it's the flip side. Purple is those that we consider the most, require the most attention. Blue is still requiring attention, but not necessarily as they have a limited impact on the statement of accounts. And again, members will see on page 46, there's the issue about infrastructure, useful economic lives has been raised there, and management will provide a response in due course. The rest of the report is for information, really. 49 is follow prior year recommendations. Page 50 is those audit adjustments. So I guess if you we have adjustments and unadjusted misstatements. The adjusted misstatements are must-haves. The unadjusted misstatements would be good to do them, but they don't impact the account and therefore wouldn't skew a reader's perception. So management take a view on whether that will have an impact on the accounts. And Appendix D is fees, which we always try to skip past in case that asks any questions. But other than that, Chair, I appreciate that's a whistle-stop tour, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, David. Members, any questions? Councillor Blowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I have a question, I guess, for you, and perhaps Mr. Holmes might want to respond as well. The £8.5 million adjustment seems like a big chunk of money to me. Is that something that, I mean, I'm relatively new to this governance area. Is that something that we should be concerned about?
It's a good question. I hesitate to point out that actually, I've got that figure wrong. It's 7.1 million. I haven't followed that through. Apologies, but it is also a net position. So within there is an adjustment.
There's movements in other directions.
Yeah. So there are some larger movements within there. In and of themselves, the fact that they've been identified and management have made the adjustments gives us assurance as auditors that the accounts are true and fair. They are not materially misstated. The question is whether they are whether they imply there is a systematic or there is implications of issues behind the scenes in terms of management's processes. In these cases, having done the work and gone through them, the majority of these are just errors, what we would call errors, and they are not, we wouldn't say they're systematic of a poor financial team or, something within the council's processes that is fundamentally wrong. So it's a bit sort of half a dozen of one and six of the other in terms of concerns. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and through Chairman. So yeah, thanks, Councillor Bow. Yeah, so agree with sort of David's position on that. I think some of these are sort of miscodings within the same heading within the statement of financial position, for instance, which I think is it distorting the view of someone's view of the financial statements? No, and we've adjusted for those in the final financial statements. I suppose that it would be a different position if, I don't know, we were like 10, 15 million pounds out and we were digging our heels in and saying, no, we're not going to adjust. And Grant Thornton was saying, no, you should. And we'll be above materiality at that point, and you've not adjusted the accounts. So that would be a different scenario.
Thank you.
Thank you. Simon on Zoom, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Question for David. On page 29, grant income, section 106, developer contributions. Can you explain why the council has been unable to identify which contributions are short-term and which are long-term?
So I have to, and apologies, some of this was done quite a long time ago. So the page 20,
page 29, it's the first bullet point in the middle column.
Section 1, okay. I mean, it is, so section 106, I'm not sure, I'll take it as read members' knowledge of section 106 in terms of what they are, unless informed otherwise. Our expectation is that there would be a central record of all section 106 developer contributions. They will normally have a time limit to them in a use them or lose them type process. And we would expect those central records to include who provided the contribution, what project it refers to, and what the timeline is for using those funds. From our review of the records, management don't have that in place at the moment, and therefore we would not be able to tell you whether these funds are being used within the prescribed time frame as required by the code. It is a record keeping issue rather than anything untoward.
The fact that they're all classed as short term, what effect will this have on risk, in terms of risk?
Well, in terms of the accounts, they are purely, as Joseph said, this is a classic example of a shift between categories within the balance sheet statement of financial position. And it would just be a material shift from short-term assets to long-term assets. In terms of use, I guess, again, it is, from that point of view, it is a classification. I guess if you were to look at it in bare terms, the fact they are short term would imply that management are looking to use them as soon as possible. It is purely the record keeping behind it that we are unable to say whether that's the correct classification or not.
Briefly, on the evaluation of the pension fund, page 28.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the fourth paragraph in the left column, mentions a variance of 1.6 million.
Yep.
So sorry, the second last paragraph in the right column, it mentions the 1.6 million in contributions.
In terms of what is that, or?
Well, how significant is that? How do you view that? How serious is that?
So it has to be said that these findings are at a pension fund level. So this is not purely, this isn't the position at West Berkshire. What this letter is doing is providing assurance to us as the auditors of West Berkshire, who are an admitted body within Berkshire Pension Fund as to the accuracy of the balances. Within the pension fund audit, they've identified a 1.6 million variance in contributions at a pension fund level. How that is split, they haven't provided an update. You know, that could be all in one member, that could be spread across a number of members. It is only here as an issue reported by the pension fund. It is well below materiality of 5.1, and we don't have any further information as to how that is split across the member bodies. But obviously it is a consideration, it is an issue at a pension fund level that the management and members rely on to inform the accounts. So we've reported it as an issue.
Last quick question for Shannon, I would believe. Shannon, who does the recommendation today sit with? Who will ultimately grant the delegated authority? It's been requested.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, what is this committee doing today? What's the decision they're making? Is this just to note somebody's granting authority? Is it this particular committee?
The committee is to note the report. There is no formal recommendation today.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to you in a moment, David, if that's all right on Zoom. But Joseph, I wonder whether you could get you to comment on those 2 points as well, especially the 106 issue raised earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, through Chair. I mean, on the 106 issues, that is something we look at the Capital Strategy Group, and actually it was a similar recommendation I think Julie made through an internal audit report. So we have reports which come through at least annually to the Capital Strategy Board on how long those Section 106 agreements have to run, because they're over different lengths and they cover different areas. So we've picked that one up, and yeah, as Shannon said, this report at the moment is to note, but ultimately it is to approve, for members to approve the financial statements. But that decision was made by the previous committee over a year ago, subject to what's happened in this report. So if you've been the committee before, kind of would have approved these, which is so what is the next step?
Okay, thank you. David on Zoom, would you like to make a question? Have a question?
Yeah, it's the useful economic lives comment in terms of having to reevaluate that. Whilst I understand that will have an impact on depreciation and on the financial return in that respect, the other element I assume is it then has an impact on your forward capital program. And has that impact been taken into account into the forward accounts, so that have you got enough cash to replace what you need to, or have you got more cash in your program than you need to be able to replace things that have gone beyond their economic life?
Joseph, David, thank you.
Yes, so there's a slight difference in sort of kind of the accounting treatment here, and then underlying what we're doing on the asset management sort of strategy, and that's particularly on the highways asset management program, which is where a lot of the work that Grant Thornton have done around useful economic lives has been. So I don't think because of this work there's a particular impact on the revenue budget or on the capital program because of looking at some of these useful economic lives that we have in here. I think as David mentioned earlier, there's been a statutory override on this. It's become in the last year a significant issue for auditors of local councils trying to assess the value of especially highways assets, which actually, in my view, to the day-to-day running of the council does not have a huge impact. But I don't know, David, if you wish to comment on that.
I can't say to the cash balances or the future capital program, but I agree with Joseph that this is one of these accounting processes whereby, as you say, the only real impact, especially with the statutory override, is into the depreciation figure. So in terms of that, from an audit point of view, we look at the useful economic lives, as I'm sure you're aware, of an asset, and if it is still operational and it is fully depreciated through the fixed asset register and the accounts, then we start to question whether the economic life of the asset is appropriate. We don't make I say we don't make judgments. We do make a judgment on the appropriateness of that, but equally we are aware that councils, reduction in funding, councils are looking to use the phrase sweat their assets more than they do at the moment and extend the life of them, and it is merely just a requirement for them to consider the economic lives applied and the appropriateness of those. But in terms of the future capital programme, I couldn't really tell you any more than Joseph has.
So it wouldn't account for an increase in potholes.
I don't. I confess I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I don't think so.
Okay, so just if the asset's being sweated and not replaced over a longer period, then if it's sort of related to roads, then are they wearing out because they're due to replacement, and you're basically reducing that investment?
I think it's worth having discussed the issue with Shannon and Joseph. I think it's worth saying that it is from at this point in time, it looks like it is a documentation issue, okay. And that actually estates are more than aware of how long things have got left. I suppose it's just we question if you see a bridge in a register with an asset life of 20 years, whether you would want to be driving over that bridge anytime soon. But again, that is a records keeping thing rather than an estate's knowledge.
Thank you. Members, any more questions? Councillor Reid.
I wonder if we can get just a little bit more colour around on Appendix A, the third and fourth point around fixed asset register and making sure that it reconciles and controls. I was just wondering if you can give us a little bit more colour about how you recognise that and how it's going to be looked at in the future.
In regard to the reconciliations of the fixed asset registers, we're undertaking a project, and there has been some internal audit work undertaken as well to make sure we've got robust processes to ensure that the records held in our finance system actually correspond to those held by property services as well. So there is an exercise underway to ensure that our programme is in fact robust in the fixed asset register. So our reconciliations are increasing and the robustness of those reconciliations are increasing over time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I've got a question about the in section Appendix B, follow-up of prior year recommendations. There's obviously a few things that were outstanding. One of which is the last point on page 49. An item selected for testing with a value of 4.2 million was made up of numerous transactions for which the council are unable to provide third-party evidence to support their award. I wonder if we might get some detail on that and the implications and what might have been done to avoid it happening in future.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I might have to go away and just converse with David on what was within that list, given that this was one that was not changed in the last just over a year since GT were last here. So I think I'll need to go away and do some digging around on that original recommendation and come back to you.
Okay, thank you. Any other points? Okay, this is a report that we're noting, no need to vote. So I'll move on to item 6. annual governance statement. Joseph, to introduce. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So every year we need to prepare the annual governance statement in line with the SITFA and SOLIS, that's Society of Local Authority Chief Executives framework. Is supported actually by the next paper on the agenda, the Local Code of Governance. And you'll see here we've included some commentary on last year's items brought forward, which is in part 5.9, and then some proposals in 5.10 of the key issues, which I think are there from a governance point into the future year. This report, even though it's for the committee to note, it was also, perfectly available there to comment as well. Usually the committee does approve this as part of the final set of financial statements. However, because the government brought forward our deadline for closing the financial statements to the 31st of May, this was included within the financial statements that were presented to Grant Thornton, well, that were presented on our website on the 31st of May. And just a quick note, just on the items and sort of why we selected those. We've got financial resilience as number one item there. So you'll see in other areas of the report that we depleted our reserves quite significantly during the year. So that financial resilience point is a key one there. And linked to that is staff recruitment and retention, where we have seen increased agency costs, which again have been reported at other committees as well as this one. And then supporting us in the future is that delivery of the transformation programme, so ensuring that those projects deliver and help to contribute to our ongoing financial resilience. And then lastly, we've got the new governance structure, which is coming in, not particularly from a sort of member governance point of view. You've seen a lot of changes through to the Constitution, through to this committee over the last year. But this is around ensuring that we deliver for the new council strategy that comes through and trying to streamline some of our internal governance so those operational decisions are made more effectively.
Thank you, Joseph. Members, any comments there? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of observations. One is absolutely personal, and that is that we seem to have documents either in print or on the computer where page numbers seem to zip around in all directions, and page 31 will be page 47, all sorts of odd things like that. I'd be very grateful if we could assume a very normal kind of system where we start at page 1 and go through with the same unique numbers going all the way through regardless. I would personally find that massively easier to deal with. On what I think is page 67 and is 8.6, it says that the issue of timeliness of external audit certification for the financial statements has not been included. And then the next line is, this is not inconsistent with the rest of Berkshire in the national picture. Can I ask why?
Joseph.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. So thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. The point there is that it's just a fair point. I've used too many negatives in that sentence. Is that our financial statements being signed off as they just kind of have been by Grant Thornton for 2021 is sort of consistent with a lot of the national picture and the rest of Berkshire that they've not had their accounts signed off. So I think for 2021, David, I think there's still about a third of audits which are still not being completed, at least nationally. And I think would be the only one in Berkshire who's had their 2021 accounts now signed off. So I think it's just picking up on some of the points that David raised earlier. I think about 12% of the 21-22 financial statements have been signed off nationally. So that kind of just gives you a picture of how behind the audit of local authorities' financial statements has got nationally.
Can I ask through the chair, how does that make you feel as our responsible financial officer in terms of being on top of what's actually taking place?
Yeah, so at the moment there's a variety of, well, there's a select committee, sort of government looking into this. The report came out only on Friday by the Public Accounts Committee, who is a useful summary of kind of where the position is and some of the risks that are sort of inherent in there, because you as members, for instance, in March, when you approved the council budget for 23-24, at that time we didn't have the 2021 account signed off. Now, helpfully Grant Thornton came along over a year ago and gave a very sort of similar presentation to one that David just did. He sort of highlighted the changes were there in blue. But it's still an uncomfortable position to be in, that you're making future decisions on public expenditure without having that auditor sort of certification on the account. So I feel a bit more comfortable now that sort of 2021 sort of looks complete, but still we are behind nationally. But yeah, there are some authorities who have got far more many years accounts open than we have, and that's a big gap to have between certified approved financial statements and the budgets that you're making decisions on as members in the future.
Thank you. Simon on Zoom, shall I make a question?
Yeah, just a quick one for Joseph. Joseph, you mentioned the recommendations for the committee to note and comment on. Just not to be pedantic, just for sort of completeness and clarification. 1.1 states that it's required to be approved by the governance committee, and at 4.1 it says it must be reviewed and approved by the governance committee. So if I've missed something, I do apologise, but possibly the three different items in mind, I've got a bit confused there.
Joseph.
Yeah, so thank you through you, Chair. Thanks, Simon. So when you it's a fair point. The governance committee will have to approve this when you approve the financial statements. So at that point, it becomes an approve item, but this will be then included, and is included at the moment, our draft financial statements in the final copy of the financial statements for 22-23, which I suspect won't come through to you until the new calendar year. At that point, then it becomes an approved paper. I should have made that clearer, Simon. That's a fair point.
Thank you. I knew it was in there somewhere. Thanks.
Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Chairman. Section 5.9, paragraph 5.9, page 60, talks about the capacity to deliver projects and that not being taken forward as an item to track next year. I think we can all agree that we haven't always demonstrated really intense quality of project management. Indeed, program management has been a problem off and on for quite some time. And I just wonder whether it's a bit naive to say, right, we fixed it now. We've got in phase, we've done a bit of digitization and integration, so we don't need to track anymore. I'd like to have a bit more assurance that we have significantly improved our program and project management capability.
Joseph, can you comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Through you. So yeah, thanks, Councillor Berwick. And as always, entirely fair question there. I think the reason determined to move it off for next year's annual governance statement is, I suppose, from a governance and a process point of view, I think the reporting through to corporate programme board, which this committee doesn't necessarily see, and the transparency of the reporting through into in phase, I think from a governance point of view, makes me feel more content that the underlying processes are stronger in that area. That doesn't mean, to your point, that every single project will be delivered on on time, on budget, etc. But I think this has been on here, I think, for 2 or 3 years now, and I think the move of where we've gone from, say, a couple of years ago, when the monitoring of that overall programme was not as thorough, I think with the enhancements to the programme office, I think provide to me more assurance around that area.
Thank you. Mr. Helms. On page, now to 5.10, page 66, the delivery of a transformation program. This is a significant piece of work, I would rather suspect. And it talks about core to delivering the refreshed council strategy. Have we got a time scale here? How long is this transformation program going to last? Has it started? A bit more kind of insight would be helpful.
Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. And yes, so the post was approved at full council on, I think it was March the 16th, for a 2-year fixed term post that they started last week. So it's 2 years. Councillor Bowe is the period length. And just starting now to get to that baseline position and already start to articulate the governance and some of the key themes as part of that transformation programme.
Thank you. Got one more. This is really, I guess, a question for my understanding. This is the government statement for 22 to 23, which, help me here. This is intended to inform the audit process that's undertaken. So I just wonder whether we shouldn't be agreeing a little bit sooner than we are. And I get a bit confused. It talks about 22, 23, and then it talks about actions for next year, 24, and struggled a bit with that.
Yeah, thank you, through Chair. Yes, so this is for inclusion in the 22-23 financial statements. So the work that Grant Thornton will do will be the backward look. So they'll be looking at those 3 that were in here, we say were articulated for the previous year. And then the 4 that I've highlighted in here are the forward look and what Grant Thornton will pick up in effect during their 23-24 audit.
Okay, so just last point on that. So is the 22-23 statement then, that's informing the audit process, or is it informing the accountancy practice, the governance practices? Because if it's the latter, then it's too late, isn't it? Because
so we have one of these every single year. So the one last year had those 3 items on. It was in effect the forward look for last year, looking ahead. And so now that's what Grant Thornton will look at as part of their review of 22-23.
thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, that was to note. So we'll move on to item 7, local code of governance. And Joseph, you're introducing this one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. So lots of this you will see in the previous report. So this is a sort of code that we should have as a separate document. We brought it as a separate document for the first time a couple of years ago, and it just has some of those key elements of the makeup of the annual governance statement and those governance arrangements that we should have in place.
Members, any questions about the local code of governance? Okay, thank you. So that is one we need to vote on. So we need a proposer and a seconder to approve the recommendation set out on page 77, which is that the Governance Committee approves the corporate code of governance. Councillor Bowick.
Happy to propose.
Councillor Wollaston, second, and all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 8, the Treasury outturn financial year 22-23. And Shannon to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Under the SIPFA Treasury Management Code, the Council is required to report mid-year and at outturn the activities of the Treasury Management function of the Council. This report fulfills that requirement. The main highlights in this report relates to the fact in the executive summary that the council has not taken out any long-term borrowing in the last couple of financial years due to the raising interest rate environment, and has focused on utilising its internal resources to fund the capital programme and maintain liquidity. The impact of that is you will see our cash balances have decreased as we have used them to support the capital programme as opposed to undertaking expensive long-term borrowing. And then I have summarised the reduction in the value of our commercial property portfolio as well. And I'm happy to take questions.
Members, any questions about that? Councillor Wollaston, you were first up.
Thank you, Chairman. Under 5.9B, why are things like this building and the other buildings that we own not included within the list of properties?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Because these are looking only at investment properties. So this would be, this probably instance would be an operational asset.
But sure, it still has a value.
Oh, it does have a value and it has a value in our financial statements, but it's only those which we hold from investment purpose that we have to separate out in the financial statements and revalue every single year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm perfectly well aware that the economy hasn't been exactly surging, and I'm perfectly well aware that property values are perhaps not looking as healthy as they once were. But I'm looking at, is it a loss of 6.6 million on all the commercial properties taken together? That seems an incredibly large figure. Or have I got it out by a factor of 10?
It is a reduction of 6.6 million essentially on that commercial property portfolio.
Joseph, you want to come in?
Yeah, indeed, but we would only crystallise that loss if you were to sell everything tomorrow. Joseph,
yeah, even I understand that.
Yes,
but
yeah.
My golly gracious, that's still some pretty meaty figures, isn't it?
Any other questions? Councillor Wollaston.
Just on the same point, has anybody challenged this valuation? Because in the meantime, we've let for the sector. I'm amazed that the drop is as high as it is.
Thank you.
The valuations are based at the end of December 22. We have now just received the March valuations, so we'll be going through them again. At that point, we do go through them with the valuers, so we'll be checking them again shortly. But the accounts are based on the December valuations.
Councillor Reid.
Again, on the same page, we've got Clappers Farm, Beach Hill Farm, Graiseley. My understanding, are they part of BH1 Graiseley development? And now that Graiseley is not going ahead, would that hope value have significantly dropped?
Joseph.
Yes, I'm not sure how much hope value there was in there in the first place. So yeah, we will have a look at that and come back to you. I mean, one of those will become the council's solar farm, which we're seeking to develop. So.
Oh, okay. I mean, if it's pure agricultural land, which I think is going around for about £15,000 an acre, that would look like significant overvaluation of those farms.
We'll have a look into that.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, this report is to note, so no need to vote. Item 9, financial statements 2022 to 23, highlight report and going concern assessment. Sharon to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the covering report to our 22-23 financial statements that are now on our internet and are accessible. We closed the accounts and published by the 31st of May deadline, which was brought forward for this financial year. This is also a to note paper. There are no formal recommendations. The key parts to note is that the council remains a going concern. So the assessment, it has been signed off by the Section 151 officer. And we have also made a change to our accruals practices, and that is to acknowledge the increase in inflation. And then it's to note the diminished reserve position that Joseph has previously mentioned in the annual governance statement. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Wollaston.
Under 4.4, I'm referring to the pension liability reduction of £123 million, which seems a huge amount. It's about 25% by the look of it, if not more, 30% probably. Why is it so high? I'm very pleased to see it, but
the pension liability it's basically, if we were all to sort of essentially shut up shop at the moment, you had to pay out the pension as of today. That's why it is so high. However, it's important to note it has reduced significantly.
my question was on the reduction, not the size of it.
The reduction has
Yeah.
been due to, they've changed the assumptions supporting the future discounted cash flow. So it's decisions that the actual pension company have made.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Genuinely not trying to be pedantic. When you say pensions company, you mean the Royal County of Berkshire Pension Fund?
I do.
Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to do a Bridgman now, and just to prove that I've read the papers. There's quite a few spelling errors in here, and I think a spell check would help. And there's one particular point in paragraph 4.8, second line, where it talks about there is no impenitent risk to the going concern assertion. Can't mean impenitent.
Any idea what we mean?
Imminent. That makes more sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Reid.
Section 4.5, you talk about earmarked revenue reserves, 4.3 million, focused on insurance, public health. And then you talk about schools, and you've got 9 primary schools reported deficit positions at the end of the year. Again, we've got a little bit more colour about, it's a bit worrying when you see 9.
Yeah, thank you through your chair. So the notes here, the overall schools balances have been increasing for the last sort of 2 or 3 years. Now, what is certainly different this year is there are more schools in deficit. So I think last year was sort of 4 or 5, and that has grown. Some of those, though, are very low numbers, so not particular concern. And those sort of 5 or 6 of the largest have additional accountancy and finance support to work with them to ensure that they've got a recovery plan to bring that school out of deficit, usually within a 3-year period. And finance and accountancy work very closely with the education team as well to provide support to those schools to everyone wants the schools at all to be in a deficit. So yeah, there's a real focus there on that licence deficit.
Good to see that you're giving the schools lots of support there. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Chairman, are all those schools that are in that situation primary schools, or are there secondary as well in that list?
I'd have to do a very quick bit of digging, I think, on my computer, but I think I'm pretty sure the majority of those are primary, especially as we've only got one maintained secondary. So primary has been by far the largest amount. There's also pupil what used to be the pupil referral units in there as well. So
Okay, if there are no more questions, we'll move to item 10, the internal audit plan 2023 to 26. And Julie, to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is, excuse me, this is an annual report that comes through to committee, and what it's doing is setting out the proposed work for internal audit over the next 3 years. Excuse me. As it mentions in the purpose of the report, the public sector internal audit standards requires those charged with governance to approve the audit plan, sorry, also the audit charter. So that's why it comes to committee every year. There's a number of the actual report sets out what's been considered as part of putting the plan together and who we've consulted on. And the report also has a number of appendices attached to it. Appendix A is the audit charter, and that sets out the purpose of internal audit, accountability and responsibility. Appendix B is what's called our audit reporting protocol, and that sets out how we're going to communicate with our clients. Excuse me. Appendix C is actually the detailed audit work programme covering a 3-year period. It is quite extensive and quite detailed. And then we have Appendix D, which is what we call an anti-fraud plan. Public sector standards again require us to set out how we're going to cover anti-fraud work as part of the audit plan. And the last appendix is the public sector internal audit standards also require an improvement programme from internal audit for me to look at our processes, what we're doing, and are there any areas we can improve. And then I need to set them out to inform committee, but also then I can update you during the year on progress against those improvement targets. So that's an overview of what the report's saying. So it's if you've got any questions, and apologies, I've got a frog, big frog.
Thank you, Julie. Members, any questions regarding that? Councillor Reid.
On Appendix C, the internal audit plan of work, 23, 24, 25, 26. A couple of things around, so you've got IR 35 on there. How are you, can you give me a little bit more how we're making sure we're not exposed to any IR 35? As I noticed, HMRC are particularly vicious with public bodies at the moment.
Yes, we've covered this twice, I think, in the past. The regulations changed, or the one intending to change. And so we carried out a review, an advisory review, to see if we were well prepared for the changes. Then central government, there's a change in central government, and then they decided they weren't going to implement those changes. And then there's another change in central government, and then they decided to implement them. So it was a bit up in the air. Are we going to make it robust, or are they not? But we carried out our piece of work, we did a report, some recommendations, to say that these are some areas where we can improve. And as part of that, we're at the moment setting up some training from our tax specialists to go through for managers. So that was one of the key elements. So we have a contract for an auditor agency, and they carry out the check scores on all of this IR 35, whether it applies or not. We also have some off contract, and it was and it was providing some advice and training to managers for those off contract that's taking place at the moment. So we've carried out that bit of work. It'll be on the plan to revisit it, but yes, the risk is the external risk of non-compliance.
I think the other one, Councillor Burke brought up the facts around governance on projects. Do actually any of the portfolio holders have oversight of things like project plans, how things progress?
At the moment, there is a proposed change of the governance of projects and management of projects. I think it's gone through the approval process and it's going to be implemented, I think, about September time. And that does require portfolio holder involvement at key stages of the process. It was already in place, but it's revamped it a little bit how it's going to work. So it's quite a complicated process. But yes, there's going to be involvement by members.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Would you?
Yes, Julie, item 4.5, sorry, paragraph 4.5, where you state the number of audit days, the planned audit days, has been reduced to reflect the current staff vacancy. I know this has been going on for quite some time now, and you are currently undergoing a recruitment campaign. If that's successful and you do recruit, is it intended that the number of planned audit days will increase as a result of that?
We haven't managed to recruit and the new person starts next week. Yay. When I put the plan together, I allowed for a certain contingency of a vacancy, not for the full year. So I'd need to go back and revisit that because that would then be, it's like a quarter of the year. So that's probably roughly what I accounted for, but I'd need to go back and check. So those figures are probably a reasonable estimate anyway.
I mean, I think you've previously reported you ordered approximately 80%. You have 80% planned days. Is that, and you've got there's four of you in the actual unit, is that correct?
When we're fully staffed, there's 5 of us. They plan. So the 3-year period, I adjusted for the first year to allow for the vacancy, or the forthcoming, those 2 years after that was based on 5 people.
The vacancy includes the 5th person. So if you have 5, could you ramp it up to 100% then?
100% is just not achievable. No. It's a rough estimate. The 80%, we could say 85, we could say 90% of trying to do the work for the audit plan. 100% for lots of various reasons. There's that's if each of the projects comes in within the time frame. We allow time budgets. For example, 15 days. If that audit takes 18 days, I only allocate 15. I said it's taken us longer than we estimated. No audit section would try to achieve, or they wouldn't achieve 100% of planned work within planned timeframes. It would be unrealistic.
Are you hitting the 80% target with your 4 staff?
The 80%'s been there for quite a long time. We come back to committee each year and report on where we are with it. Some years it's near 86%. One year it was 91%. And a couple of years it is linked to sometimes to vacancies and how I've adjusted for it, and sometimes it's 82%. So I'm saying I think 80% is reasonable, although we don't often go below. I think last year it was 77% because of the or 76 because of the vacancy.
You're muted, Simon.
I just said thank you. Did I? Was I not picked up?
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions? Thank you very much, Julie. So this is something we're voting on. Looking for a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Berwick to propose, Councillor Reid to second. Thank you. All those in favour of approving the proposed audit plan and audit charter? Unanimous, thank you. Now item 11, the review update to the anti-fraud policy and related policies, also introduced by Julie.
Thank you again, Chair. This report is covering some amendments that we've made to the Council's anti-fraud policies and related policies. Internal Audit is responsible for maintaining these policies and they're due for review and renewal every 3 years. Because they're owned by Internal Audit and the work of Internal Audit is the responsibility of the oversight is by this committee. That's why they're coming to this committee for approval. And it's also in the terms of reference for the committee to have oversight of the Council's arrangements for fraud. So that's the background of why it's coming to committee. There have been very minor changes. There's 3 documents basically. There's the key one, the Anti-Fraud and Corruption Policy. Then you've got the Anti-Money Laundering Policy and then the Bribery Act policy. The key changes are to the anti-fraud and corruption policy, and then that's in section 5, and that's just been amended to explain a bit more about investigating any potential fraud. So that's the key change. The other 2 policies, they're just minor wording changes. Just whether you're comfortable with the content of what each of those policies is saying.
Thank you. Members, any questions? I wonder, Julie, what was it that initiated these changes?
It's just the 3-year review process. So it's a controlled document, and every 3 years we're required to review it, or earlier if there's any changes in legislation. So yeah, it was just due for renewal.
Okay, thank you. So this is something that we're voting on. Also need a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Jeffrey to propose, Councillor Wollaston to second. Thank you. All those in favour of these? Thank you. That's unanimous. And that brings us to item 12, exclusion of press and public. Going to ask members to agree by voting that the press and public leave the room in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Unanimous. Let us know.